model that we tend to apply, approach that we apply to these local communities, because we understand sometimes the agroecological conditions in those particular areas will not favor tree growth. So this is one model that we continue to apply. We continue to sensitize the communities. We continue to build their capacities in terms of managing and allowing the regrowth of these trees. And we've seen with quite a lot of success in the areas that we've worked in the past, how FMNR has actually contributed to transformations of the lives of the communities in those particular areas.
Is there a cost implication to it?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. All you need to do is basically take care of the tree growth, of the regeneration. So you have to probably apply some enclosures, take some measures basically to protect the trees from being eaten up or by the browsing animals and all that. So there basically no costs are associated with that at the level, at the community level.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Alice, recently, last month, Kenya hosted the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit. And I'm wondering, were these part of the conversations? Because they talked more about use of organic fertilizer going forward. Is that part of land restoration, especially when it comes to arable land?
Yes, the issue of land restoration, and also especially when you look at soil health, is very timely, including the summit which was held in Nairobi. But then when we look at the social policy and governance issues, we find that, for example, for the research community, it becomes very important to make visible the policy that we have and how we can be able to translate that or have that implemented. For example, the earlier example that I alluded to about the work that APHLC is working with some local and international consortium partners to make visible the impacts of climate change, for example, on health, not just on human health in terms of food security, nutrition, and mental health, but also the ecological health that would be informed, by the soil health in terms of fertility and also carbon sequestration. So we're making visible the impacts of climate change through research, through policy and public engagement. It becomes an important step towards also involving the communities through participatory approaches and also tapping into the traditional knowledge that has been held within the communities for a very long time. So bringing these technologies, bringing the policy, bringing the stakeholders together so that we can all work together with a common vision so that we can be able to work towards landscape restoration and also applying those local innovations, techniques, and the held traditional knowledge.
All right.
Yeah.
Time now for a break. Am I right? Yes, sir. Let's take a break now. We'll be back to continue with this conversation. You're watching Morning Cafe. And Willis Okumu, environment and climate change expert. Before we get back to the conversation, let's watch this land restoration feature by Sheila Chelangat.
The wilderness of the landscape, intense smell of the dust, and the incredible liquid voices of birds chirping, plus the profile of hills, ushers you into Laikipia County, sitting at the foot of the majestic Mount Kenya. The land here was once fertile and teeming with life, but years of overgrazing, deforestation and climate change have left it desolate. Diminished vegetation cover, drying up of water sources had led to ultimate loss of livestock and human life. At the heart of the community's struggle was this plant that had choked out native vegetation, disrupting the ecosystem.
This is the invasive cacti species known as Opuntia. It had not only overtaken the landscape here, but also reduced the forage space for the livestock. It had affected 60% of the grazing land, and now efforts are on to eliminate this menace.
It has really affected our livestock. One is in terms of health, they lose weight, they lose value. Taste of the meat is also affected. Most of them get blind, and they would even get lost during the day as they're grazing in the fields. As they come home also, the spines, the small spines from the Opuntia, it gets transferred to the children and to the women as they are doing the normal duties as milking.
And so the battle with the invasive Opuntia has even turned biological, with the community resorting to the use of the cochineal insect.
We are using a cochineal, that is a battle, where we if you can see something like whitish thing, there is a mdudu that is, we are also transferring to a sparsely populated area where there is a lot of cactus.
It feeds on the sap of the Opuntia, and eventually the Opuntia dries off. We are using the greenhouse where we are rearing the cochineal. So the cochineal stays for a period of 4 weeks. Then we go and infect the Opuntia in the field. So that one has been proved to work, but at a landscape level. The process is slow, but it has proved to work.
For the cochineal, we use about 1.6 million a year, engaging casuals to do that, which is slightly negligible compared to the size of Opuntia we do have.
The difference of the land with and that without the Opuntia is quite evident.
If you can compare that side and this side, where we did is totally successful. We have seen the grass growing, and the land fertility is coming back. There before we used to buy milk during the drought, but right now if you have 2 cows, the children will be happy. The Maasais like milk. You can step in every homestead and find very healthy kids.
Also ensuring the return of biodiversity has led to them adopting other techniques. The techniques adopted include reseeding and semi-circular barns.
This intervention, you see the gully here, they are called soils. Then at the same time, we did reseeding. This grass you can see here, we reseed. It is called the love Maasai grass. Now, and our original plan is to make sure we have these seeds. When it dry ups, we harvest, so that we translocate to other part of the community.
Tulikuwa tumeshimba ikikaa hivi, maji ikija inaenda kwa ingine next, inaingia kwa ingine, so maji imetembea polepole. Sasa furaha yetu sasa kama wafugaji wa hapa, tukiona nyasi imekuwa mingi, tunaona sasa tuko na kila kitu, tuko na security, tuko na chakula ya kutosha juu. Sasa ng'ombe yetu ikikula hii, tunauza hiyo ng'ombe, tunalipia watoto shule. So ni furaha yetu kabisa, tunaona nyasi imekuwa mingi hapa.
Here was totally bare, 90% bare. But because of the efforts, you can see that there's a lot of a lot of forage growth because of the effort.
But the journey to fully healing their land has not been without challenges.
We didn't thought that this one will work. Even community were against this fencing. They thought maybe the land is being taken away.
You see, once they make these same-cycle bands, you know, they are stepped on by the elephants, then it does not hold water anymore. You know, it becomes a challenge because the effort they are putting at times are being destroyed by their own life.
And as they reflect on how far they have come on this journey, they can only hope for a brighter future.
It's a wake-up call to everyone, not only to us, but to everyone, and especially the actors in climate change. As I was growing up, this land was really beautiful. Lots of species, water everywhere, and for the last few years while I was in school, you could hardly get any drinking water. Livestock could not really get enough water to drink, and migrations were really much because of the droughts. And for the last year or two, I've seen great change, and we're really positive that there's so many actors coming into the field.
Our future is bright. We are hoping that one day all the degraded land around the conservancy are restored back to their natural states. Therefore, we'll see improved livelihood, improve the number of wildlife around because of the restored biodiversity around.
This immense change is courtesy of a community's effort in restoring their land that had once severely impacted their livelihood. 3 years ago, it looked like a pipe dream, but now they are re-energized in replicating this across their vast land. Sheila Chelangat for TV 47 in Mayanat Community Land, Laikipia County.
Yes, Sheila Chelangat there with that feature. Back to our discussion, and we could blame a lot of these issues we now experience, especially on climate change, and probably a crisis of nature and biodiversity loss, but there's also human activity, and I want us to pay attention to some of the human activities that are unfriendly to what we seek, the ideal situation. Gerance.
Thank you for bringing that up, because there are two major causes of desertification, land degradation, and even like extreme weather events that you're having right now. Number one is the climate change, as we know. This is pumping of greenhouse gases, this carbon dioxide and the rest into the atmosphere. And we also have the human activities, which is technically like deforestation, extensive agriculture, and all those.
Are you saying agriculture in itself can actually be negative in some situations?
Yes, extensive agriculture is one of the major causes.
What is extensive agriculture?
Basically, over tillage of the land. You like till each and every year, using of fertilizer, synthetic fertilizer. And nowadays the synthetic fertilizer also have like plastic pellets in it. And these plastic pellets also affects the health of the soil and making the soil more porous, like it cannot even hold water. And whenever rain comes, it's taken away. So I will focus on deforestation and extensive agriculture. So deforestation is when like you go cut the trees, then leaving the land bare, exposing it to environmental issues like wind, like water erosion, and even sometimes like even the sun. Sometimes it's not good for the soil if it's exposed. And when you talk about extensive agriculture, this is basically using of over tillage, like tilling the land each and every year, making the soil loose, and also monocropping at some point when you plant only one type of crops in the farm, and like you don't have any crops, cover crops, like the beans and the rest that covers the soil and not exposing it to the environmental degradation. So those are the main ones. And I should say like climate change is the biggest one, so we cannot lie about that one. And the more we continue to invest and drill more fossil fuels, I feel like even when we want to restore the land, we'll not have the ideal environmental conditions to even restore the land. So first we need to fix the climate issues. We need to stop drilling fossil fuels. We need to move to renewable energy first. Then when it comes, it will make our life easier to restore our land.
Okay, but that's a conversation at the global level. Back home, is it possible to ask our farmers, especially on this issue of over-tillage? For a farmer in Kitale who plants maize year in, year out, and that is the main source of income for his household, asking him to stop to allow the soil to recover is a challenge in itself. It may not be possible to ask these people to do it. What do you say to that, Willis?
Yeah, so thank you, Fred. Challenges about climate change, and particularly those that are human-induced, because you see, at the end of the day, farmers must earn their livelihoods. And sometimes it's normally a challenge in terms of balancing protecting the environment and ensuring the farmers actually earn their livelihoods. But having said that, I think it's important. This is the point at which we really need to candidly engage farmers. We need to sensitize farmers on the impacts, negative consequences of poor land management practices, because all these basically contribute to the problems of degradation you're facing today. So when we talk about a farmer at that level, community level, it's important that we build their capacity. We sensitize them on the need to adopt good land management practices. Aside from that, my colleague just did mention about deforestation, which is really a big problem. And we're seeing a lot of trees actually being cut down for charcoal and for all that manner of things. And we know how trees are important, how forests are important in terms of regulating the climate and fighting climate change and all that. So some of these human activities actually are those that contribute to the problems that you're actually facing today. You look at the issues to do with chemical fertilizers use. And I know recently there was a debate about the use of fertilizers, but it's important also to note that farmers also must be informed about the right choice of fertilizers and the right mix of fertilizers where they can apply, because excessive use of fertilizers, on the other hand, also contribute to the degradation, contribute to the climate menace that we're experiencing today as a globe. The issue of overgrazing or overstocking, that is also another thing, particularly for the pastoral communities. We understand a lot this livestock is really held dearly by some of the pastoralists, but it's also important to also be very candid about the fact that overstocking would also actually contribute to the land degradation problem that we're actually facing today. And that's why, as World Vision, we've taken the deliberate effort to sensitize the communities at the local level about the need for proper land management practices, about the need to have the right balance of livestock to prevent future degradation of land, and about the need to prevent deforestation.
On that issue of overstocking, you at World Vision, of course, you deal with so many communities in the arid areas, right, and in areas within northern Kenya and the eastern part probably. The more livestock you have, the better for you. The bigger your camel farm or the number of cattle head you have, the better for you. So how do you balance that conversation? Now you have too many camels.
Now, that's why we say sometimes it's basically necessary and very important to do so. Sensitize the farmers, let them understand the consequences of overstocking. Yeah, sometimes it's a challenge, especially when it's a cultural norm to keep livestock, just as you put it, as many livestock, because that's what is considered to be wealthy. So, but it's important to engage very candidly and very openly and transparently with the farmers, and making them understand the negative consequences of having excessive livestock. Because anyway, the size of the land remains the same, it remains constant, the fodder remains the same, but if you have excess of the livestock, basically you're actually running at a loss. And that's why we take the initiative basically to try and sensitize the farmers and also build their capacities to diversify their livelihood options as well, so that they do not have to be over-reliant on livestock, but they can also consider other livelihood options for survival.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Alice, I'll take you back to that conversation about fertilizer use. You mentioned about the use of synthetic fertilizer. And the conversation now is shifting towards use of organic fertilizer. But the question is, how sustainable is that in terms of production and regular supply of organic fertilizer, the kind of rural communities and smallholder farmers that we work with? Is it even sustainable to ask a farmer, can you produce your own organic fertilizer to use? Because it's not readily available in the market.
Yeah, actually, you know, the current farming systems are, I think part of the problem and part of the solution, because you see the conventional farming systems are very narrow. We have very limited diversity in terms of the foods that are produced, especially by the smallholder farmers. And that is why we are seeing, high levels of malnutrition, stunting, especially we have statistics showing that in East Africa, about 30% of children under 5 years are stunted. So this malnutrition is coming up as a result of that low diversity in terms of the foods that are consumed by by the children. Also, even is the same case with women, especially those in the reproductive age. So there are underlying solutions that are local. For example, when it comes to adoption of agroecological practices, like even very basic techniques or innovations like the kitchen gardens are highly encouraged. Diversification in terms of the crops, making good use of, for example, the traditional vegetables. We also have the indigenous fruits that can be incorporated on farm. And then, especially when you talk about the drylands, where the soils have been degraded, we have the traditional diets and traditional foods like the highly neglected and underutilized crop species. For example, the tubers like yams, the sweet potatoes. We also have the traditional African leafy vegetables that are not only highly nutritious, but they play a significant role in local diets and also improving the livelihoods. Then when we also look at the gender issues when it comes to land degradation and some of the human-induced mechanisms that are causing desertification and degradation. When you think about, for example, resource use in terms of extraction of forest for firewood, it mostly affects women, because with this resource limitations, you see like women and girls are the ones who are mostly disproportionately affected, because it means that as these resources become degraded, they have to travel further in search of fuelwood or in search of water. And this is at the expense of, leisure time. It is at the expense of their health. It is at the expense of foregone opportunities that they could be making a livelihood or increasing their economic opportunities. Okay. Yeah.
On that question of fertilizer, because I don't think I've gotten an answer to it, the use of organic fertilizer as opposed to the synthetic one you'd mentioned, how much of a solution would that offer, and is it possible to use that on a wider scale, given the fact that the availability of synthetic fertilizer is actually wider in Africa?
Just to inform you, Fred, is 80% of the food that you eat in Kenya comes from smallholder farmers. And smallholder farmers, like the population of smallholder farmers is technically the 80%. And I'm from Kitale myself. We have a huge tract of land. But how I've seen how my grandfather has managed his land is, number one, we don't have a specific place where we're going to plant maize this season. It's like this season we plant maize over here, next season we plant maize on the other side. And then where we planted maize last season, we have like either animals being used to graze on that land, meaning that they are fertilizing the soil as time goes by. So crop rotation and also like paddocking and creating spaces on where you can rotate your animals and your plants technically solves the issue. And because I've said 80% of food that you get is from farmers, basically that's how it's supposed to work. And for those, maybe for the our colleagues maybe in the mountain region where they have small tracts of land, as much as they have zero grazing, maybe for goats and maybe for kettles, they can use this manure over here to just spread it on the farm, year in, year out. For that, they're improving the soil health. So it's something that is doable. It's just like, I feel like we're promoting multinational corporations that are getting money from selling you the seeds. And right now, you also talk about the seeds that we have in Kenya. You know, it's an offense for farmers to share seeds. It's a constitutional thing. Like, it's an offense for farmers to share indigenous seeds. So meaning that the seeds that you have right now in our agrovets and everywhere they sell, it's self-terminating. So you can just only plant once, then you cannot use the produce to plant another one. Meaning that you need a lot of fertilizer to make sure that you have one bet. Like if you're playing like poker, you only have like one
to maximize on the production.
Yes, you have only one bet to make sure that you maximize on production. But if it was organic agriculture, where like you use indigenous seeds that you can use for the next seasons, farmers wouldn't have that pressure to make sure that, like, oh, they want to maximum production. So basically, it's something that is happening. It's just like we've removed our extension officers, government extension officers from farmers, and we've left the multinational corporations to go and become extensive officers. And for them, what they think about is just profit.
Business, yes. The bottom line.
So like, yeah, pump more. Okay. But if we give our farmers the liberty to share the seeds and to share these indigenous knowledge within themselves, will be good.
Okay, Alice, you wanted to add something to that?
Yes, I can supplement what my colleague is alluding to. You see, we have also seen instances where we are tapping into some of the drivers of desertification or of land degradation, for example, deforestation. We have, for example, technologies that are looking into improvement of cooking technologies like biogas. Yeah, so this is one of the technology that is being promoted to not only halt deforestation, but on the other hand, we would use, for example, the bioslurry, or which would have otherwise been a waste product, to improve soil or as an organic fertilizer. And also to mention what he has spoken about, when it comes to agroecology, it mostly reduces the, it may not necessarily like halt use of the synthetic fertilizer, but then it can in some way be able to reduce the use of synthetic fertilizer through, of course, as we are saying, improving the soil organic matter, and therefore the inputs in terms of the fertilizers or the pesticides is very much reduced. Okay. So we can also be able to tap into the solutions for land degradation and deforestation to inform or to feed into restoration of the soil.
Okay. And still, as we talk about human activity, Willis, I'd like you to talk about pollution and waste and how that affects the soil degradation.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. Waste and pollution. Waste pollution is basically a big problem globally. It's a problem that basically affects land degradation, because you see some of the products like plastic wastes, these actually have very harmful chemicals in them, and those are those that basically go and interfere with soil quality. So this is really a big problem that must be addressed. So I think it's important for the global community, the Kenyan community, all stakeholders involved, to come together and realize how bad the situation of waste is in terms of contributing to land degradation. So efforts really must be put into ensuring that waste is actually reduced. If as much as possible, we must try and recycle the wastes that we generate in the process. And of course, if we have the right policy implementation measures, like the recent polythene bag, that is a very key direction in terms of avoiding all this.
Yes. Because I've seen people use plastic bags to plant their seedlings. And I don't know, I'm not an expert in this issue, but I've seen a lot of plastics on farms, and I'm wondering, okay, if at all this is a problem, then why keep using it?
Right. So we basically, as World Vision, that's something that we really we discourage as much as possible. We don't use the plastic bags in our tree seedlings, in even the farmers, nursery bed operators. That's something that we really discourage. So we sensitize them about the use of the organic coverings all right, organic made fabrics, materials that would actually hold the soil together and continue to do that. So we discourage as much as possible the use of polythene bags.
Briefly, because we're just about to take a break.
Okay. Apart from being an environmental scientist, I'm a plastics campaigner at Greenpeace Africa. And maybe it has like tickled my plastics campaigning gist. So maybe just to explain to our viewers how plastics pollution affects our soil quality. Yes, we can see plastics as a big thing like this one, or like this. But during environmental disturbances or so like degradation, we find that these plastics break into small particles now called microplastics. And these microplastics are the ones that have the major problem because it leaches into the soil, leaches into the water, leaches into the air that you even breathe. Once that happens, basically we have 16,000 chemicals being used to make plastics. And 13,000 of them 4,000 of them are have health risks. So we find like these chemicals leach into the soil, disrupts the biological architecture of the soil 100%. So making sure that we have like the earthworms that goes through into the soil that helps to aerate the soil. If they eat the plastics, now done. And you see like now then maybe it was a good soil like loam soil. But because of the plastics leaching, it becomes now more like sandy because it's now porous, so it cannot hold any water. And to come into my colleague, I want to maybe, differ with him. Recycling is not the solution. We need to cut production of plastics.
Okay. Hold that thought. We'll come back to that discussion as we continue. Watching Morning Cafe, let's take a break. We'll continue this discussion after. Yes, land degradation, land restoration, desertification and drought resilience is the theme of this year's World Environment Day celebrations. And I'm still in studio with experts helping us understand the kind of big discussions that we have. And just before the break, you differed with Willis on this issue of plastics. I'd like to give Willis an opportunity to clarify on the same. I know it's a big debate.
Thank you very much, Fred, and for giving me this opportunity to clarify that. Basically, what I said is, I didn't say that recycling is the only solution. It's part of the solutions, the much bigger solutions, many solutions that we really need to adopt in terms of reducing plastic production. And by the way, when talking about waste, waste is quite general, not just limited to plastics that we're seeing around the world. But I do agree with him that the most important thing, first and foremost, is to cut down on the production of waste, or plastic waste. But we also have to come to the realization that we cannot do that 100%. There will be waste, plastics that will be generated. So what do we do with those single-use plastics? Of course, we have to make deliberate efforts to recycle those so that we prevent production or use of virgin plastics in the process. And we see how big the problem of solid waste particularly is, not only to the country, to the African continent, to the world at large. Landfills continue to pile up every single day. We don't have, some of the countries don't have the capacities basically to manage that solid waste that we see being dumped in those landfills. And Fred, let me tell you, by the way, that solid waste production is one of those contributing factors to the climate change, in the sense that in those landfills, there's a gas called methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. 25 times more potent, actually 28 times more potent than the typical carbon dioxide that we know of in terms of causing climate change, global warming. So we must make deliberate efforts basically to reduce the amount of waste that we actually spew into those particular landfills. Okay. Yes.
Alice, from a research perspective, this issue of solid waste and plastics, I'm sure is a big discussion. What do you have to say to that?
Well, first, maybe I do not have, much expertise and experience in management, especially of solids. But then I believe that in addition to, the recycling, the reusing of plastics, the reduction in terms of production, which are one of the ways, there is also, the social and behavioral change that is necessary, especially raising awareness for the communities to really understand about how to handle waste, how to separate waste, how to make good use of some of the waste, that can be used, for example, to enhance our soils. But in addition, actually, to the solid and plastic waste, remember we also are dealing with a crisis of food waste, because most of the foods that is being produced today end up actually in the garbage. And also this is also another crisis that needs to be put in the limelight, so that you can be able to educate in terms of how we can be able to make good use of our food, how to preserve our food, how to also produce foods that are locally relevant, that are appropriate, that people understand their recipes, how to prepare them, how to preserve them, and how to, make good use in terms of nutritional content. Okay. So I think it is very many interrelated factors, and it is also like different components of waste management, not just plastic and solid waste management, but also the issue of food waste.
Yes, on food waste, because one would imagine on that conversation about organic fertilizer that would be a good thing, but it appears it has negative effects to it as well.
Yeah, I feel like post-harvest loss when it comes to maybe overproduction. I feel like Kenya, I don't know, I think you're opportunistic kind of society in terms of like when you hear someone's farm within your locality made good tomatoes, all of that locality will go and produce tomatoes, and now you have so much in the market, and now like you hear people producing maybe onions, then becomes so much in the market. So I feel like diversification of all these crops need to be done, and also to have post-harvest storage places where you can even add value to tomatoes, maybe make tomato sauce. So these industries need to be set up. And also, how can we compost this organic waste. So most probably, I feel like in my apartment, people mix waste. So how can we separate the waste and have systems that can make sure that if it's organic waste, it goes as organic waste, and if it's synthetic or any other type of waste, it can go on the other side. So going back to Dr. Ali's sentiments is like also behavioral change is really, really needed to make sure that we elevate ourselves from this.
Okay. Anything to add on that issue, Willis?
Yeah, overconsumption seems to be a problem in the human population. So as much as possible, we try to avoid, excessive consumption that would basically result in waste that goes to the landfill. So in terms of waste management, it's important to segregate waste at source so that it can be easier to handle and recycle those that can be recycled, and the rest can be processed.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's all.
All right. Now, the biggest driver of land degradation, drought, and desertification is said to be climate change right now. This is a very interesting conversation to have in this area of the world.
Yes.
We hosted the Africa Climate Summit last year, but if you ask many people, they still don't understand what you're talking about. We talk about planting 15 billion trees, and probably that's the best that we understand in as far as climate action or mitigating effects of climate change is. Are we saying, going forward now, because we're getting almost towards the end of the show, that we are at a loss on how are we disadvantaged when we're talking about solutions to land degradation, drought, and desertification, given the fact that the biggest problem in as far as climate change is concerned is not caused by us directly. It comes from different areas, probably the global north. Are we at a disadvantage as probably sub-Saharan Africa in this conversation about land degradation?
Yeah, disproportionately disadvantaged, yes. But then we have the opportunities, especially when it comes to tree planting or tree-based restoration. I think that is one opportunity that can be tapped into. Although maybe you may want to touch into some of the caveats. For instance, the World Environment Day, in most instances all over the world, it's usually like has this gospel of tree planting. But many times what do? We plant the trees, which is basically integrating a tree seedling into the soil. And then what happens next? We leave it there. Yes, we leave it there. So it is until we can be able to ensure that we are tending the seedlings, we are inputting, the management strategies to ensure that that tree can be able to sustain itself. And it is only through that we can speak about performance indicators in terms of carbon sequestration or in terms of the area of coverage of the trees that have been planted, and also seeing our ecosystem functioning in the way that they are intended to, in terms of provisioning services like food, timber. It is also about regulation of water, purification, temperature regulations, and also we have cultural benefits that we can be able to get from the trees. But then we need really to, as actually scientists say, we need to move away from tree planting and start tree growing. Yeah.
But the feeling is that from our end, whatever we do, whatever interventions we put in place is a drop in the ocean. This is a bigger discussion way beyond what's happening in Kenya. And so are we saying that when it comes to this discussion about land restoration, desertification, and drought resilience, that there's nothing much for us to offer on a global scale?
With that, because I am an adamant believer of people's power, knowing that we are the ones who elect our leaders. We are the ones who can influence our leaders. That's why we have petitions, we have all these things that goes up. But now, coming to the question, say like, we are at a disadvantage, that is true, but we can be the pioneers of sustainable world. Like Africa has the huge potential for renewable energy, has huge potential for agriculture, to do sustainable agriculture. And I feel like it's really important for us to make sure that the real issues are addressed, which is like the biggest driver of climate change is fossil fuel production. and fossil fuel use or dependence of fossil fuels for energy. So we need to decentralize the energy sector to make sure that we don't have even the international oil companies. We make sure that we have mini grids wherever we are. Like if it's in Kitale, we have a river over there. How can you have a mini grid that serves that locality? And if it's an industry, they have a good place where I can put solar farms or anything that, any energy that can be used within themselves. And also we have the national grid.
That's a very ideal situation, almost utopia-like, if we could...
It's not utopia, and the reason why people like in Makueni, whom like the national grid has not gotten into them, they have solar panels. That is now the decentralization of energy, as simple as that. It's that simple concept. Maybe it's put in a very big word, but it's that simple concept. Everyone to generate their energy wherever they are. And
you believe we can get to a point where we do away with fossil fuel completely in our situation?
At the moment, not entirely, but we can as well, like that's why we call it sustainable development. Because if you don't have just and fair transition, then that's gonna be a disaster. So we need just and fair transition towards like renewable energy, not just wake up in the morning and say like, yo, all drilling needs to stop at the same time. So, and also talking about tree planting, I think Kenyans, we are so much into tree planting until we think like it's just normal stuff. Tree planting itself also is a science.
We've had 2 holidays.
So, yes,
two national holidays to plant trees.
And if
it is a big deal.
If you don't focus on the ecological zones, this is basically, you can't go plant acacia tree on top of Mount Kenya. It won't work. Or if it works over there, it's going to have the same effect like Mathenge tree in Baringo, which is like literally affecting the whole community. Like you find the livelihoods are now going down rather than helping restoring the land. We need to plant the right trees at the right place. Let's not like run around to plant trees anyhowly. Like even today, my advice is if you've bought trees that are not in the same ecological zones on where you're going to plant, please abort that mission.
Okay.
And also we need to make sure that we diversify our land use practices. As we said, like there's no need of our farmers, maybe in Baringo, to have so much livestock, and they can also use the same land to do beekeeping. So diversification of this land and resources needs to be done. And maybe my parting shot will be...
No, we had to get to the parting shot. I will come to that. Willis,
yes.
On this discussion of whether or not we are at a disadvantage in this bigger global discussion about climate change.
Yeah, definitely, Fred. We basically disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change. And that, you know, we are not really the major contributors to the climate change, the menace that is now impacting the world. I think Africa contributes less than 3% of the global greenhouse gas emissions responsible for causing climate change. But I think at this point I want also to point out that it's not time for blame game. Nature is basically in an emergency mode. Time is running out for us. It's time for every person, every stakeholder, every nation really to roll up their sleeves and take actions, climate actions, that would actually go towards mitigating the impacts of climate change. For Africa, we do not have that capacity, adequate capacity, basically to deal with the impacts that we are presently feeling. So what option is left for us, even as we continue to engage in international discourse on how to mitigate the effects of climate change? What we are supposed to do, take advantage of the local climate action, innovative techniques, so that we can be able to adapt to the effects of climate change. One of them, by the way, when you look at issues to do with climate smart agricultural practices, that's a very simple technology that we can basically adopt, support communities, basically adopt to live with the consequences of climate change. We can help them diversify their livelihoods, by the way, so that they do not have to be over-reliant on rain-fed agriculture, because of course right now we're experiencing, you know, the effects of drought and all that manner of things. So we're looking at taking advantage of the indigenous knowledge, working together with the local communities. They have vast amounts of knowledge in terms of how basically they can adapt. Ours as supporters to that adaptation, we can only try and enhance that. We are not going to introduce new ways of their lifestyles. Remember, they have their traditional ways of living. So, but we can only work together with them to ensure that we come up with the best appropriate local climate actions that will help them adapt to the effects of climate change. Africa, we have huge potential, as my brother said, in terms of renewable energy potential. Sun, solar, is too much. And just at the right time, as you did mention, I'm a climate scientist myself, but I do not see this happening in the next 50 years, where we are going to have fossil fuel completely eradicated. You remember there were talks in the COPs about, you know, that tug of war in terms of facing down, facing out, and all that. The truth of the matter is...
And we're always sitting at the side, we have nothing to say.
We have nothing to say, unfortunately. We don't have the voice. So even as we engage in this climate discussion, talks, it's important that for us as Africans and for the local communities that are adversely affected by the impacts of climate change, we must work together and find best possible solutions, climate action solutions that will help us navigate the climate crisis that we face.
And before you give your parting shots, there's the issue of youth engagement. It's a big conversation, especially with the kind of technology that we're facing. When you talk about communities, a lot of communities, even the smallholder farmers, are from a different generation. And you say a lot of this knowledge, they've had it for years. But there's a younger generation that's coming into this, and it's not really interested in what has been happening. How difficult has it been to engage the youth in as far as this discussion we've had so far?
Yes, over the years, it has been really difficult actually to bring young people, especially into agriculture, as it is associated as an activity of the poor. It's not cool, it's not...
It's not cool at all.
Yeah, but with time actually, we are seeing young people tapping into opportunities along the value chains of agriculture, especially when it becomes, you know, economic generating. So there are avenues that young people are looking into, for example, in terms of value addition, in terms of involvement in the market segment. That is also one of the area. But we're also having young people who are involved in uptaking some innovations on farming. For example, at APHLC, we have the Zero Hunger Initiative, where we work with young people in the urban areas, especially the informal settlements, providing them with the capacity, the skills, the financial literacy when it comes to urban farming, like sack gardening, and also diversification of crop species that are being produced in such, you know, limited spaces. And you can see actually, you know, young people are really interested and also becoming champions when it comes to some of, you know, even like climate resilient technologies that can be spread in the communities.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
What has your experience been like, Gerans, working with the youth?
I'm a youth myself, so working with myself.
We are saying you are the challenge.
Technically. But yeah, it's been really interesting, and there's been a growing interest for the youths to tap into agriculture, because now employment in Kenya, it's getting to a crazy trajectory, and now the only place that now youth can find solace is on the farms. And we have very wonderful projects going on in Makueni, even here in Mathare, which we're working with youths to make sure that we also have a hub called Ubunifu Hub in Garden Estate, where we bring these youths together, we train them, capacity build, and that's when, like, now we give them a little bit of grant, then they go and explore the opportunities on agriculture in the place.
Production?
Yes, production. Like, there are those who've told me, like, they have not eaten Mama Mboga's mboga, they have just been eating their own mboga.
Oh.
So, and that is really, really good. Yes, so that has been one of it. Then number two is lobbying and just awareness creation. It's really important, because without awareness, you cannot act on anything. So we've put a lot of resources also on awareness creation, and these goes into even documentation of these indigenous knowledge, because this indigenous knowledge, because I think there's distortion of information as time goes, so it's good to tap this information as early as now, have it on record. Yeah, so we're having farmers who share these testimonials and also share this knowledge, then now we document it, and that's the one that we use to capacity build our youth. Okay. So hopefully it's going to work within a few years, as my colleague has said, like we have a time frame, but also we need to remember that the climate crisis is here and now. Okay.
Willis, you have a go on this issue about the youth.
Yeah, yeah, thank you very much. I believe the youth hold the key to a sustainable and secure future. The future belongs to them. And for us as World Vision, we have taken cognizance of the fact how important to engage the youth in climate change discourse. We believe the youth actually hold the key to unlock some of the most climate sensitive, innovative technologies that we can think about. So we basically support and capacity build the youth that in the areas that we work with, basically to come up with innovative solutions to address issues to do with climate change. One of them, of course, is about engaging them in the digital innovations. We support them, basically establish those digital hubs where they can come up with very climate smart innovative solutions, basically to help address the challenges of climate change. On the other hand, we also try to support them to establish enterprises that are very climate sensitive. For example, the nursery beds, we support them to establish that and operate those. We equip them with the skills basically to successfully run those ones. We also support them basically in the manufacture of energy efficient cook stoves so that they become self-reliant, and in the process also support the deforestation efforts to combat deforestation, because with these energy efficient cook stoves, it will basically reduce the consumption of fuel use that most families and the communities basically rely on. So we believe in engaging the youth and the children alike in the process, in the climate change mitigation and adaptation discourses. We basically leave no one behind. And that is our mantle, that's our clarion call, that we must not leave anyone behind in terms of securing the future for the generations to come like him.
Parting shot?
The future belongs to you. So the youth, we encourage, I think the youth must really be very active right now in terms of taking efforts or participating in activities that basically will help them secure the future. For the stakeholders, nations, it's about time, and others, it's about time that we work together as partners, as collaborators, so that we come up with very meaningful solutions, climate solutions, to address the future impacts of climate change and to adapt with them.
Okay, Gerard, you go next.
For me, I would say like the climate crisis is real, and we've seen it, we've felt it in our communities and even in our livelihoods every day. But we have step-by-step measures on how we're going to elevate this problem from us. Number one, we need to stop subsidy on oil exploration. We also need to make sure that we diversify our energy systems and invest more into renewable energy. And number two is, I say, like we need to embrace ecological agriculture. Climate smart agriculture is the only way that you can survive through these erratic weather conditions. And the third one is we need to restore our tropical forest. As Africa, we need to restore our tropical forest and to make sure that we don't just plant trees for the sake of planting trees, but we grow them. Yes, and we need to continue to document this indigenous knowledge and to continue to embrace smart agriculture, as you said. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. You have the final word today.
Okay, good. My parting shot would be, climate change is here with us. We saw in 2023, temperature records were shattering. I think it was an average of about 1.45 degrees Celsius, which is like so close to the 1.5 degrees of the Paris Agreement. And so we have really to think about how this impacts the communities. As of last year, everyone felt that impact. Even I think the grannies in the village could tell, actually, whatever you guys call climate change is really happening. There was floods, it's drought, it's prolonged drought, it is high temperatures and all that, and the heat waves. And then we have this impact on food security, nutrition, it's mental health, especially for the pastoralist communities. So I would say that it is time that we all take action, start local, start with the opportunities that are available, agroecological practices, it is agroforestry, it is adoption of the traditional diets. Let's embrace everything that will support climate resilience. And then for today, being the World Environmental Day, as my colleagues have mentioned, let's go plant the right tree at the right place for the right purpose and focus on tree growing, not just tree planting.
Oh, yes, very important. Not just any tree anywhere. Plant the right tree at the right place for the right purpose. Thank you so much, Dr. Alice Karanja, Food Systems Researcher at APHRC, Gerance Mutual, Environmental Scientist at Greenpeace Africa, and Willis Okumu, Environment and Climate Change Expert working with the World Vision Kenya. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your very well-considered opinions on this matter as we mark the 51st edition of the World Environment Day, this being the 5th of June. It is probably the biggest international day for the environment, of course, led by the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP. And the biggest, event is being held in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia this year. In Kenya, the event is being held at the Embu University, happening today. So yes, the conversation continues throughout today. Do stand by for a lot more discussions, today being Wednesday, matters relationships coming up, and later on, we're going to have a chef right here on Morning Cafe. My name is Freddie Ndimuli. Good morning.